life living and making a living can sometimes wear us out, grind us down, and dull our senses. So for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive, let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hi, thank you for joining us. My name is Stephen Mills, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk, a series of verbal essays in this television format, welcoming, if you will, our finest mentor and guest, Bern Moses.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. You look familiar. I think you've been here before.
I think I have.
Actually, it was a couple of weeks ago. There's been a couple of shows that we've had to air. In fact, I think last couple of weeks we were featuring the director and the producer of this show, Nick Shelley. He was on last couple of weeks, and it was delightful because he has a young daughter who had reached that point where it was time for the talk.
Oh, yeah.
And he had said, hey, can we do the talk on TV? And then we'll watch the video together. And I said, sure. And we got a lot of comments on that the last couple of weeks. But this week we circulate right back around to what you and I were discussing about processes and result orientation and this type of thing. And I don't know if you remember exactly where we reached. And I don't know that that's important because we can splice our life together in such a way to make it work.
I promise.
We were talking about process, and frankly, I have people who say, what exactly do you mean by process? Mm-hmm. How would you define that based on your experience?
Well, when we live as professionals functioning or as regular folks, there's so much emphasis placed upon getting somewhere, getting to the end, to the promised whatever, mm-hmm. the result. And so few people pay attention to making each step count and actually functioning moment by moment so that the end is definitely going to occur. It'll occur whether we know it well mm-hmm. or not. And so without paying attention to the process of moving toward what we're pursuing, we often destroy the possibilities and the hoped-for result by not paying attention to it effectively.
I see that people sometimes are so result-oriented if they're not confident or certain that they will get them or don't mm-hmm. know where to go mm-hmm. to achieve them. They don't go, they don't do, mm-hmm. they don't perform. They frustrate and agitate and freeze up. Mm-hmm. Anxiety creeps in, coupled with fear, and pretty soon they're off doing something else. And it's not at all uncommon. See, our primary concern, of course, sometimes is salespeople, networkers, people who have an intention. And I say it's okay to have an intention. Mm-hmm. In other words, everything we do is designed to make those results possible. The intention is the result, but it's kind of like you visualize that, you know, exactly the way you want it to be, mm-hmm. and then you put it in a little box and set it up there in the future, a little transparent box so you can peek in and check in and make sure you're heading in the right direction.
Hope for it.
And then come all the way back here and then lean forward and catch yourself. Lean forward and catch yourself. In other words, if we maintain our balance, kind of do what comes naturally, mm-hmm. we proceed like we had before and look back and check and oftentimes disappointed in our effort and the consequence of it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? We cannot live retrospectively and expect to accomplish more than we have in the past because we're doing essentially the same thing over and over again. The other day I walked into an office that I hadn't been in for 5 years. Not going to mention the man's name, it's not important. But we were re-interviewing, kind of maybe considering putting him back into our environment, into our business. And it was right at 5 years when I walked into that office this last time. It was precisely the same. There had been no perceptual changes. In other words, there was actually books lying in the same place they were lying before. I remember. Mm-hmm. I remember pictures that were still a little bit askew and still the same financial stresses and the marital conditions and everything mm-hmm. that were existing 5 years ago. And you can know that he's been working hard, been mm-hmm. troubled and anxious and applying himself in many mm-hmm. ways, but by rote, probably what he had done the previous 5 years.
What is there, Bern, that allows us to move from the habits that keep repeating the same grim life day by day to what's often people call courage. What is it that allows action to suddenly become courageous so that we become different, so that we put together the steps necessary to be more successful in life or living or making a living as well as loving, like you've often said?
A lot of it is acknowledging we're anxious, knowing that there is fear, and at the same time acknowledging that in all probability it's irrational, particularly if other people have done precisely the same thing and have accomplished, you know, because we have those capacities. But a lot of it is just recognizing and mustering, if you would, the fact that we have courage. The reason I said fall forward and catch yourself,
yes.
Imagine that first time at the top of the ski slope, and you look down that thing and everything is out of proportion. I mean, it looks like, you know, sure death. Okay?
It is.
But yet some people will push off and proceed to correct their fall, is really what they're doing. See, skiing is a correction of the fall. If you didn't correct, you know, you'd reach speed you couldn't possibly manage. Like, what was her name? Anyway, she managed it and won a gold medal. Most of us would not manage it. But yeah, it's a corrected fall. It's like an airplane landing is a corrected crash. That's actually what it is. They make those adjustments. And I think that's one way of measuring initiative, I think, is that willingness to fall forward into something and then catch ourselves, fall forward and catch ourselves, and let it be okay. Occasionally, we're not catching ourselves until we reach our hands. In other words, the willingness to be clumsy and inept and inadequate in order to develop skills, because nothing we do, ever, whatever we do well, let's put it that way, we started poorly.
Why is it okay? And how can I make it okay, or learn to make it okay inside myself, to be clumsy and awkward and bumbling around in order to move forward?
A lot of it is, I think, begins with an intellectual understanding that that's necessary. That would be a first step to say, yeah, that makes sense. Because I don't think we stop and analyze the fact that indeed everything we do well, we started poorly. We have a 1-year-old in our environment now, and it's just a constant inspiration to see her thrust herself into life.
Yes.
You're taking those risks, sometimes tentatively, but sometimes just going for it, and see that progress every single day. Every single day there's progress. And so it could be with you and I and everybody who's viewing this program, that if they would venture out and take those tentative, frightening, cumbersome, clumsy steps, pretty soon that all smooths out, and that's what you do. All of this has to be done prospectively. What I started to say before is that if we function as we have, and there's an incredible tendency to do that, because our subconscious mind, being a status quo pro, I call it, okay, kind of wants everything to be the way it was, and so unless you take command of your conscious mind, giving your body, your faculty, your facility specific instructions to move forward and take that risk, the subconscious mind is saying, hey, this is fine, this is the way we do it. And so we live by rote, I call it. Okay? And then we stop and check to see how we're doing, and not much has occurred. And that'll never change until we come back and recognize that this has to be done prospectively, predeterminedly, precognitively, in short, manageable, incremental moments of time. It's called a peak experience. I know we've talked about this before, that as you proceed along a time lifeline, which is between now and this place in the future, okay, that there has to be an awareness, okay, that you're doing this for the environment, for a project, for people, which means there's love involved. And love gives you courage.
Outside of yourself, or ourselves.
Love gives you courage. And then that willingness to prepare. In other words, to prepare. See, the will to win doesn't mean a thing. I've had some interesting examples of that in my life. You know, we practice, or we preach oftentimes about the will to win, you know, how important that is. Well, that's really not the case. I remember when I was in the Navy, I did some boxing, and I did the boxing because at one time my high school coach in football called me a coward. And because of that, when I got the occasion, I thrust myself into an environment where I was really frightened. I mean, you step into a ring with 10,000 people watching, and there's a man across that ring that you've never met before. You know what I mean? You have no idea how capable he is. I mean, that's about as close as you're going to get to being a gladiator. You know what I mean? It's, yeah. And so I thrust myself into that environment, and out of my fear, really prepared myself. I mean, I did more road work than my peer group. I sparred more rounds. Probably the only one at that time. This is back in 1947, 1948. I was probably the only boxer back in those days who actually lifted weights. And I was severely criticized for it. Everybody said, it'll slow you down, and we know better now. You know what I mean? But back then it was a real bad thing to do. But I did it because of my fear. I was preparing myself. I'll always remember I went to Quantico Marine Base. And being in the Navy, this is an awesome experience, because if you're going to go there to fight those Marines, you know you got a problem, because everybody knows that one Marine can beat up any 10 sailors. I mean, that's just common knowledge. You know. But anyway, when we got there, I remember that evening, just before the fight, we were in the locker room getting our hands wrapped in that ceremony that we go through, and I saw my opponent. And gosh, you know, kind of overwhelming. This guy was big, probably stood around 6'3", muscled up. I mean, just a big guy. Looked like he was fast, and he was mean. Hitting that heavy bag and warming up, and he had that look like, I want to kill that sailor, whoever he is. And I got a little overwhelmed. I figured, oh, shoot. So anyway, we got in the ring, and I insisted I wouldn't go out to fight unless the referee would introduce us in the middle of the ring. Because that's not done in amateur normally. I'm not fighting him unless I meet him in the middle of the ring. Because what I was up to, I wanted to stand real close to him and look as small as I could, so he wouldn't look too good when he beat me up. And I just wanted to take it away from him if I could. Anyway, I was already on the short end because the referee was upset with me.
Sure.
And we met, and we shook hands, went back to our thing. They rang the bell, and we came out fighting. Well, I moved around, and I did have a lot of training and a lot of preparation. And I was moving around, I kind of jabbed high, and his elbow came out, and his chin came up. Just a little. But I thought, ooh, that's interesting, because that's the natural thing to do. You know what I mean? In other words, that's a natural thing. And boxing is a supranatural sport. Now, you do it because naturally you're going to lose. Now, you got to stay cool. You got to think. You keep your elbows in when they want to go up. You get your chin down when it wants to come up. You know what I mean? All those things you got to counter in training. And he evidently hadn't done that. So I moved around some more, and I kind of jabbed low, and his arms dropped just a little bit. Okay? And I figured, aha. You know what I mean? Unprepared. And so I just threw caution to the winds, went inside, and I used to throw combinations. I mean, I really did combinations. They talk about it, but they don't do it much anymore. But it was a jab, jab, cross, a hook, an uppercut, and jab away. Okay? And by the time I got through that combination, right, he was on the floor, grimacing with pain. It was over. And it's not that he didn't have the will to win, because he did. Right. But he had not prepared. And I think that was the difference. You know, I really enjoyed boxing. Sometimes, in fact, we might even do it tonight. I mean, just the idea, what a great sport. Little things like, for example, the public is not aware of, that it's 35th on the list of sports with injuries. In other words, tennis and ping pong and basketball and football all are more dangerous when it comes to injuries. It's incredible. And the worst thing I ever saw happen in an amateur boxing ring was a broken thumb. And it was mine. No, and it had to cut that thing off with a razor blade. But that's the only injury I've ever seen in boxing. Now, professional is something else. Because they take it to the limit. Sure. People hit fatigue and stuff. But the willingness to prepare seems to be the key. Actually, I was really quite good at boxing. I actually had thought about turning pro. You know, it's hard to do in the Navy because you belong to the Navy.
You bet.
You know. But one of the reasons I didn't, I really began to have a lot of trouble with my hands. The referees kept stepping on them. I remember one time in West Memphis, Arkansas, it was the second round. I had this guy on his knees, begging me not to die. I knew I had trouble when the promoters of the fight began to talk to me about printing advertising on the soles of my shoes. You know what I mean? This
good contract.
Yeah. Anyway, I could go on and on with that stuff. The willingness to prepare, and then the need to make a contribution with what you've acquired.
Now, life isn't like a sports event where you have competitors, or at least the myth is that there are people out there in our daily living who are going to do anything and everything to stop us from making progress or getting somewhere that's good.
Never have had it happen.
Yeah.
That's one of the problems, I think, when you start talking about goal and result orientation and stuff, is that there's a lot of parallels made between life and sports. And they're not good examples. Not good examples because, like you say, in sports, a goal is something very specific. It's a line to cross to get a point, or a basket to get a ball through, or a base to hit, or whatever. The trouble of it is, in sports, there's something that exists that doesn't happen in real life, and that's either 5 or 9 or 11 guys, just as big, just as strong, just as fast, just as capable, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just as conditioned as you are, trying to keep you from doing it. And life is not like that. Now, it might appear that way in some corporate environments or competition, but in our life, in creative direct selling and this kind of thing, I have never encountered anyone who said, no, Bern, you're not going to make it through me. You know what I mean? There's never been that. And so this thing of having a purpose, preparing yourself to make a contribution, is what I call a peak experience. That only occurs predeterminedly. So you can't think about it over here and have it happen. It's got to be thought of here. Okay?
Thought of in what way? How do we prepare?
Okay. We have an intention here about what we want to accomplish. And we go back here in this moment and say, okay, what can I do in the next 15 minutes, we'll say, next 15 minutes, that will be on task. In other words, I predetermine what I'm about to do, evaluate the effect that's going to have on the consequence or the fulfillment of the task, and then act on it. Just do it, knowing it was at least it was the right thing to have tried or to have done.
Okay.
PEAK. In other words, predetermine what you're about to do. And that has to be done consciously. I mean, to predetermine, and we have that capacity. But predetermine, evaluate the effect it's going to have on our purpose, and act on it. Okay. Now that's what I mean by just falling forward. So we're prepared when we fall forward, we're going to be able to catch ourselves. We're not going to be so clumsy that we'll be destroyed, that's for sure. And then when we do that, come out of it knowing it was the right thing to have done. Can we do that? Yes. I mean, there's no surprises, Stephen. Now, everything we do, if we think about it, we know what the consequence is going to be sooner or later. If it's neglect, they're going to have difficulty. If it's purposeful behavior, we're going to have results. Dorothy O'Brand, a writer back in the 40s, wrote a classic. In fact, I think it was one of the first books on sales written by a woman, and it was called Wake Up and Live. And in there she said that when you enter the causative environment, I gave that to her, when you go into sales, okay, you can do so with a calm, cheerful assurance that as you do the appropriate things will occur. That essentially it's impossible to fail. It's easy to not try.
Oh, very easy.
Yeah, it's easy to not try, to neglect. But if you're in process, as if you're doing these kinds of things, there is no way to go but up. Because every time you have a peak experience, that's a preparation for the next one, which can perhaps be a little bit taller. You know, a little bit more preparation, a little grander contribution, and growth comes out of that. And whenever there's growth, you know there's elevation.
I know in my own inner terror, you know, between the peaks, and there's those valleys.
Oh, right.
Those are the moments that I work at summoning that sense of courage, that sense of hope that there is a little more, from a little more putting out of effort and practice, that it'll come.
Oh.
The result will be closer, the effort will be less intense.
And how do you know that?
By practicing and seeing it happen in the past.
It always has happened in the
past.
It has, yeah. No, it always works. There's some things that you just know that if you do this and this and this, you're going to get a certain consequence. It's inevitable. It's there. Now, occasionally, I think when we're progressing like this, there's going to be some of these that are necessary. Little peaks.
Sure.
And these what I call, I'm going to change my pen here. These are called maturation points. Okay? and maturation points. In other words, we have to grow with some balance. And this may be our professional effort. You know, getting stronger and stronger with our profession, and yet there may be these elements in our life that have been neglected that need to be developed so we can proceed. For example, it might be our social skills. It may be our spiritual consciousness. You know, it may be a person feels a lack of spirituality in their life, and so that has to be taken care of. It could be the socialization, like I say, learning table manners or a new language. Like what you're up to right now. I mean, that's a socialized thing. You got to prepare yourself.
Yes.
And sure, it's a profession, but without it, you're not going to be proficient. And so these are important points. But once you take care of those details, chances are these peaks can start growing again. I mean, it's that process, and to be aware. But it's process. It's now, since we are in command of this, we can size this up. We can have a pretty good idea of what our predetermined activity is going to be and know that it's within our capacity. Okay, it may not be developed, it may not be an ability yet or a skill, but we have the capacity for it. And too little celebration is done over capacity. I mean, it's just, which means the acknowledgement of our mind, our faculty that we can see and hear and feel and smell and taste and remember and imagine and make choices and decisions. I mean, that's a wow with a capital W and an exclamation mark after it. I mean, that's powerful. But to celebrate that constantly and say, okay, how am I going to employ this? What a tragedy to have this capacity for growth and progress and to satisfy ourselves doing essentially the same thing day in and day out. I mean, it's not right. Because I need your best, you need mine, we need Jeff's, and we all need our listeners or viewers, I mean, to be as good as they can possibly be. We never peak out. I mean, we never really tap the full resources. We don't have enough time. You know what I mean? We can get better and better and better and better. I know there's an ideology out there that says you're perfect just the way you are. Well, I don't buy that. I think we're still in a practice place where we can get better and better. This is important. And the only way, once again, to do this is predeterminedly and by compartmentalizing. See, this is one of the things that you've mastered, and almost to the point now of unconscious consciousness. It's kind of who you are. I believe it's evident to me in watching you conduct your life that you're in the moment a lot. And when you're in the moment, you're conscious. And you're more able to influence that next act. I've watched you purposely proceed into a communication with someone and to really pay attention on purpose. Not, you know what I mean, and you don't even think about it anymore. And to, I mean, practically every gesture, every move you make in a social or professional environment is predeterminedly measured. Predeterminedly measured. And people, I was talking to a lady this last week and said, yeah, Stephen Mills, how do you expect us to do what he does? He's a monster, she said. No, maybe he wasn't a monster, but she says he's just magical. I mean, it's too much. It's frightening almost, you know. And I said, yeah, but I mean, it's all relative. Should have seen him when I met him.
Exactly.
Yeah, he was partly bald, and he was...
Still practicing that.
He was just getting started, you know,
exactly.
In that segment of his life.
Much better at it.
We're always starting in that segment of our life.
You bet.
It's fascinating. I'm beginning to get process tied down.
You know, often when I was a young lad, I read and noticed from reading dozens of biographies that other people's lives were solid evidence that the process was not always obvious to them, yet those who kept practicing, it seemed to always reach a measurable, remarkable end.
It's wonderful when you think about it. The best reading we can do is biographies and autobiographies, because anyone of any import had challenges, overwhelm, you know, just tragedy. Yeah, it's exciting, and it doesn't seem to matter who it is. They had to pay the price, and a lot of people, when they're going through that, feel that's their doom, that's the end, that's taking away their life, and actually it's tempering it, forging it, getting them ready, if they will only recognize that's what's happening. I mean, I don't think any of us can brag too much about the things we've overcome, because people probably wouldn't understand, and they think so. You know, but the fact is, to us, it was a big, big deal.
Sure.
I know, for example, my stuttering when I was a young man was just overwhelming. A lot of pain in that. And to be able to embrace that and to study it and to examine it and to practice and to gradually be able to manage that pretty well doesn't mean I'm not a stutterer, but I manage it better than I did, you know, in 1955, you know. And it was a long trail. And even now, nothing ever leaves us altogether. Even now, if the attention focuses on me, I can have some real trouble, just like it is right now. For example, we've lost our half hour. You know? Somewhere out there it's gone, and we'll have to review it on video and see what we did. You know how you get caught up in this, you don't even know where you are.
Yeah.
This is Life Talk, though. Life Talk. And our phone number is 1-800-661-3490. And you can get a lot of information on us if you want to go to our website, which I'm especially pleased with, www.burn, if you will, please.
Moses.
Thank you. .com. And if you'll kind of register in and let us know who you are or give us a call, we'll send you some tickets to a live performance that we're doing here in the area soon. Or certainly send you some literature, some handouts, and you can start studying with us and see how you can get into process.
Excellent.
My name is Bern
Moses.
And you're Stephen Mills.
Thank you,
Stephen.